Let's get started with Vite. Scaffolding your first Vite project with npm. Let's try it out. I'm going to paste that command. I'm going to call this project Vite D3 template. Select a framework. While we could use Svelte, React, or Vue, I'm just going to use vanilla. Vanilla JavaScript. All right, it's done. Let's check it out. I'll run npm install and then npm run dev. This is the command to get it started. And then I'll click this link. Hello Vite. Count is 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look at the files that got generated in VS Code. Main.js is our entry point. This is where that hello Vite thing was implemented. But I'm just going to get rid of all this because I want to import select from D3 selection. For that to work, I'm going to have to first npm install -s to save it to package.json D3 selection. All right, now that should resolve. And let's start back up the dev server. And now we see a blank page. Excellent. Let me open up the dev tools because we're going to need them, especially that console. All right, let's make something show up with D3. I got Copilot going and it's helping me out here. Let's say make a circle. svg.append circle. Set the cx and cy. Set the radius and set the fill. Beautiful. But select SVG is not going to give us anything. What we really need to do is select the body, which is there, and then append an SVG. Oh, and we have to set the width and the height. All right, Prettier's making this line way too long here. Let me just stop and make a Prettier RC. Yeah, Prettier is what I'm using here for the automatic formatting. And we can just drop this configuration in here. And I'm pretty sure we can just say print width. Let me set it to 60. All right, now if we get back here and save, boom, that looks way better. All right, we are setting up an SVG, giving it some dimensions. I'm going to use 960 by 500 in homage to blocks.org. And then let's see if it runs. Okay, there's our circle. Oh, it looks like a flag or something. Let me make it gray. I can right click and inspect. And we can see that in fact there's the body. There's some stuff. Ooh, maybe this SVG should go inside of that div. But anyway, the SVG is there and it's working. Yeah, Vite provisions this index.html that has this ID of app div. And while we're here, let me change the title. Vite D3 starter template. Let's put this SVG inside of this app div. Instead of the body, I'm going to select that app. The hash will select by ID. And there we go. Our SVG is inside of our div. All right, here's where the real fun begins. What I want to have happen is that when I save this file, that should hot reload without refreshing the page. Currently, what's happening is it's refreshing the page. I don't like that approach because as things scale up in complexity, it may take a while to load up the whole thing. And especially if you've interacted to get to a certain state, I would rather still just be in that state and then have the code hot reload in place using the existing DOM nodes and the existing state. So how can we do that? Hot reloading. allows you to make changes to your code and immediately see the results. We can do this with the HMR API. HMR means Hot Module Replacement. Notably, this is already done if you're using React, for sure, and other frameworks. But since we're using vanilla JavaScript, we have to set this up ourselves. A module that accepts hot updates is considered an HMR boundary. Whoa! There's also a way to accept updates from direct dependencies. So let's say we import some module. It has a function that should be called. If we're inside Vite, we can accept a new version of that file. And then that will be, I guess, imported, and the same thing that comes out here as foo will come here as new foo.foo. Let's try this out and see if we can get it working. I'm going to copy this code and bring it into our code. All this DOM manipulation we do, I want all this inside of a function so that we can move this into a whole different file. And this will become the thing that we import. And because we're doing stuff with D3, let's call it viz. Why not? So we're going to be importing viz from viz.js. And then I'll take this and move it into a new file called viz.js. And this viz, I'm thinking, would accept a container, which is the DOM element. This way, you could import this viz function into some other context, like a huge product or an existing project, and it would all work, and it would just inject itself into the DOM element you provide. Over in main.js, we will be importing viz and then calling it with app. So let's see if that refactoring worked, regardless of the hot reloading stuff. All right, we got a select as not defined. Got to add that import back in here. All right, we're good to go. Now, let's try to get this hot reloading working. It says here it can also accept an array of dep modules. Don't need that. All we want to do is support hot reloading of this one module, viz.js. I'll call it new viz. And notice how it says new foo, question mark? Foo? I guess this is the module that has the named exports on it. So what I would want to do here is say new viz dot viz, and then call that with app. All right. This should work. The moment of truth. If I put these side by side and change something and save, whoa, it worked. But it didn't do what we expected. We solved the problem of integrating with Vite's Hot Module Replacement API. Now we have to solve an entirely other challenge, which is to write hot reloadable code with D3. When we select this container and append an SVG, that's exactly what it does. It's going to append a new SVG. So that's why we end up with 2 here. Clearly, that's not what we want. We want to reuse the existing SVG. To do that, we need a different pattern here. The pattern we need is select container dot data. We're going to use D3's data join. And look at that. Copilot suggests array of 1. Sure. That's exactly right. It's like we're doing the data binding thing, but instead of, rows in a CSV file, we just have this array of one thing because we want to trigger the enter, update, and exit stuff with just one thing. For that, we can use the dot join SVG syntax. Now what this is going to do is the first time through it will create the SVG, and then the second time through, when it hot reloads, it's going to select the existing SVG. And sure, it'll write the width and the height again, but that's all right. I'll leave a note here. This pattern breaks, but let's put it to the test. When I load it, I see that it didn't quite work. It never made an SVG element. Just put the circle straight in that div. All right, we're missing a piece here. That's the select all SVG. All right, and I saved, and the hot reloading worked. Let me refresh the page just to get a clean slate here. Okay, our SVG is inside of our div. We have a circle. And now if we change the position of this circle and save, the hot reloading worked, but now we have two circles. We need to apply the same pattern over here. svg.selectAll circle.data1.join circle. Now if we change this, it works. All right, we've basically solved the problem of hot reloading with D3. But let me do something extra cool and fun, which you can only do with hot reloading, which is to transition these things. Yeah, transition is not a function because we need to import it. npm install -s d3 transition. Start up the dev server. Still not a function. All right, let's see what the README has to say. I guess we import transition and then make a new instance of it. Let me try that. This example here sets the duration and the ease. And then we pass it in to selection.transition. Let's try this. All right, let's make that transition. There it is. It's called T. And then now that we imported something from this package, I think as a side effect or something, this is kind of something weird in the way these packages work. It adds this method to the D3 selection that we created with select here. It's some kind of magic going on, but let's see if we can make this work. Oh, it says D3 is not defined. Right, that's because we imported transition. We should probably import ease linear too. And we got to import it from D3 ease. And that's another thing we should npm install. Okay, mise en place. That should give us everything we need for this to work. If I refresh this page, all right, it transitioned in. But what I really want to test here, if it will transition the hot reloading. If I change the radius to 100 and hit save, boom, look at that. It worked. We can even set a longer duration on this transition, like 5 seconds. And check this out. We can kick off one reloading and then do another in the meantime. And it's transitioning both of them. So this is completely epic. This is the way I want to be working. And yeah, I hope this can be a useful template for people. But what about interaction? What if we want to build something like this, a circle that follows the mouse around? I made a video where I built up that example about 6 months ago. What I'd like to try doing is instantiating this mouse follower inside of our Vite Hot Reloading example. The main difference is the signature of viz, which takes a second argument in addition to the container, the DOM element. The second argument is an object that has two properties, state and set state. And then when we move the mouse, we call set state to track the X and Y position, which is then fed back as state.x and y, which we unpack here and then use to position the circle. That's how this mouse following interaction happens. So let's go ahead and migrate this into our Vite example. The first step is to introduce state. Back in our Vite example, let me just put this right here, state. And this will be passed into the viz as the first argument. So we have to pass it in there and also over here because we want consistency between these two. And then we need set state, which is defined in this example as a function that takes as input next, which is a function that takes as input the previous state and generates the new state. And then render is invoked. And then render calls the viz with the container. Maybe we should just pull in all this stuff. Yeah, that would fix the duplication between here and here. All right, I just pasted all this stuff in. Now we need to define container. And I think I'll bite the bullet and select the actual DOM element here. Now we can get rid of this. And to handle the hot reloading, we want to capture the same logic of if it's a valid module. So if the new viz is there, then I want to replace the definition of viz here. So let me set that up as follows. Let viz equals original viz. And we can import viz as original viz over here. This is renaming on import. That way, viz refers to this variable here, which can change over time because we used let to declare it. So if there is a new viz that was hot reloaded, we can just say viz equals new viz.viz. And then to propagate that update, we can call render. All right, let's see if this runs. Oh, it looks like I missed a step, which is the first render. So I'll just call render for the first time. And there comes our little circle. Let me test out the hot reloading by going over here and changing the radius. And sure enough, it seems to work. Now we can start bringing in parts of the viz implementation from the mouse follower example, such as setting the width and the height of the SVG based on the size of the window. This is sweet. This is really how it needs to be done for responsive visualizations. All right, here's our viz example, which I'm going to gut. I'm going to gut this example. I'm going to clear it out and bring in the new elements, like the width and the height, which I'm just going to paste. And then the second argument here needs to be state and set state. I'll bring in this mouse move handler, drop it right here. And then I'll grab this piece that unpacks the state and then sets the initial state. I'll drop it right here. And finally, we want to use X and Y to position our circle. I'll get rid of this transition and use X and Y here. I'll set the radius to 50 and use the default fill of black. All right, here it is. I refreshed the page and it got the original position, the initial position, and when I move the mouse, it does move. There is a bit of an offset though. I think that's the default margin coming in. And we're just using event.x and y from the mouse event, which these are not always the most accurate. See how the circle is a bit off? There is a D3 pointer utility for just this purpose, for getting the exact right coordinates. We can import pointer from D3 selection. And then over here, we could say const xy equals pointer of event. And then call set state with x and y, just like that. All right, fits nicely on one line. That should hopefully fix the alignment issue, and it does. Look at that. dead center on the cursor. Amazing. And while we're at it, let me fix that pesky issue about this default margin. Over in main, we can import style.css, which I'll create as a new file. And I think the margin is on the body. Let me just try setting margin of 0 like that. And look at that. No more gap. But we get these scroll bars that I don't think need to be there. I'm going to try to get rid of those scroll bars by saying overflow hidden. And now look at that. It goes all the way up to the corners on all the sides, and we don't have any scroll bars. Awesome. This is the way a data viz should be. And wouldn't it be cool if this whole thing responded to resize? As it is now, if I resize the window, see how that SVG is still there? It doesn't automatically expand. But when I move the mouse over the SVG, it does. Because every time it re-renders, it resets the width and the height of the SVG to the size of the window. Responding to resize is something that we really need for responsive visualizations. Like, we need to know what the latest width and height is in order to position everything properly. So let's try responding to resize here. Let's assume there's state.width and state.height. And if there is no width, we want to initialize the state to have the width and height from window.innerWidth and window.innerHeight. At this point, we return because the call to set state triggers another call to render, which takes over control flow at this point. If we don't return here, there will be bugs. But that's just the initial size. What about responding to changes? We need to listen for resize events. So every time the window resizes, we set the state again to update the width and height. And notice that we're passing ... state. That will preserve every other property on the state. For example, the X and Y position of the circle. To test that out, I'm going to make it change the position of the circle when you click instead of every time you move the mouse. So I'll just change that event name to click. So I refreshed the page, and now it's not following my mouse, but if I click, it does move. And check this out. If I put it here and I move this, whoa, it resizes. The SVG is resizing. That's fantastic. All right, to wrap it up, I want to bring back those cool transitions and just show the fun you can have with hot reloading. So I want to bring back the transitions. Bring back that easing. We'll create one of those transitions. And let's make it 5 seconds. It's going to be super fun. So let's find where we're making those circles. And here, let me do that transition. So what happens now? If I load the page, it transitions, which is not really what I want. You know, I wanted to initialize in the right place. So I guess instead of just doing this very coarse-grained join, we can specify what happens on enter, which is, yes, append the circle, and also set the CX and CY. And then we specify update to just do nothing, and then exit to remove the circles. Although that never happens in this case. So now if I reload the page, it reloads in the right spot. And now when I click, oh, too late, already running. I don't know what that's about. This indicates to me that there's some issue around instances of the transition. Maybe the thing to do is to create a new instance of the transition for each time we render. I'll just move that into this function. And actually, let me just move it down to right before we use it, right here. Let's see if that solves it. Oh, it started moving with the hot reloading. Interesting. So if I refresh and I click, boom. Okay, it works. No errors. Brilliant. So here's the real test. Can the transition to X and Y also happen simultaneously with a transition of like the radius from the hot reloading? So if I make the radius 200, yes, yes, these are going in parallel. That's fantastic. So I can click and then change this to 2 and then click again, and it's all happening. And then let me try setting up a color. So it changed color. I'll bring back the radius to be 100. And then I'm going to install this VS Code color picker extension real fast. All right, so imagine you're doing work for a client. You built up this cool data viz. You're giving a demo, maybe selecting some things in menus. And then the client says, hey, can we change the color of those dots? And you're like, sure. Let me just pull up my handy dandy color picker here. And there you go. The colors will transition in real time. And, it preserves the state that you were at. So this kind of thing, I think is just amazing. I think this is the future of how this sort of work is done. The hot reloading, I think it's really, really clutch. So, all right. I hope this is a useful starter template for people. And as I look through here, I just want to clean it up and always not destroy the previous state. So I'm just going to make a couple small final tweaks here. Then I'll make a commit to the open source repository. I'll make a pull request called mouse follower. I'll merge it in and link to that PR from the README as the second part of our progression. The first part of the progression being the initial hot reloading example. And you can view these pull requests as reference examples. So yeah, there it is. Vite D3 template. Feel free to try to use this and even, submit pull requests if you have some ideas. I think I'll continue to maintain this going forward as a reference example, and I might add various things into it. All right, thanks for watching. Take care.